Straight Talk Europe exposes its hypocrisy on Russian energy by targeting India. If there's a gold medal for hypocrisy in geopolitics, the latest EU sanctions on India's Nayara refinery may be the performance to beat. Western leaders never miss a chance to moralize about fighting Putin's war machine, yet Brussels' righteous anger rings hollow when you examine what Europe is consuming to meet its own energy needs. While the European Union rails against India for purchasing Russian crude going so far as to hit Nayara Energy, part owned by Rosneft, with fresh sanctions it continues to import staggering volumes of Russian gas that heat its homes and power its industries. If ever there was a case of do as I say, not as I do, this is it. Let's leave politics aside for a moment and consider simple numbers, which often tell the purest truth. In 2024, according to data compiled by the International Energy Agency, the EU's Russian gas imports actually increased by 18% compared to the previous year. Despite all the chest beating, Russian gas exports to Europe went up, not down, with the EU importing roughly 45 billion cubic meters, up from 38 BCM in 2023. By late 2024, Russia had bounced back to become the EU's third largest gas supplier, with a market share of nearly 20%. This was exceeded only by Algeria and the United States. December 2024 saw the highest share of Russian gas flowing into Europe since the invasion began, 25% of EU gas imports that month. Meanwhile, total EU imports of Russian fossil fuels in 2024 were valued at 21.9 billion, outpacing even their annual financial aid for Ukraine. Drill deeper, and oil tells a similar tale. Even after pledging to wean themselves off Moscow's crude, EU countries imported 13 million tons of Russian oil last year. If Brussels truly believes that every euro funds Putin's aggression, those euros are still flowing at industrial scale. Now, let's talk about India, the world's energy shock absorber. Far from being Moscow's silent partner, India has become Europe's primary refiner of Russian crude, plugging the fuel shortfall created by the EU's own sanctions. In fact, India's actions have led to oil price stabilization since 2022. When Europe closed its doors to direct Russian oil, India bought up those barrels at discount, refined them, and shipped back diesel and petrol to Europe. In hard numbers, the EU's imports of refined oil products from India jumped roughly 58% in 2024. In just the first 9 months of 2023, EU states bought 7.9 million tons of fuel from India, 2.5 times the previous year's figure. The joke in the oil trade is that Europe buys Indian fuel filled with molecules of Russian origin, and everyone knows it. In fact, EU rules officially allow this if crude is substantially transformed, i.e., refined and re-exported from a third country. It's not considered Russian anymore. Convenient legal fiction, absolutely, but it's been the backbone of Europe's energy transition since the war began. Unsurprisingly, India isn't taking it lying down. Official statements from Delhi have called out EU double standards in no uncertain terms. As India's foreign ministry spokesperson bluntly put it, there should be no double standards, especially when it comes to energy trade. India doesn't subscribe to unilateral sanctions. With over 85% of its oil imported and no realistic short-term alternatives, India's embrace of discounted Russian crude is common sense and not collusion. And for those who forget, India's oil imports from Russia have only ballooned because Western Europe has crowded everyone else out of the market. In 2024 alone, India imported over 52 billion of Russian crude, meeting almost 40% of its energy needs. All the while, it is Europe, not India, that is hedging, delaying, and ducking real sacrifice. Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz bluntly admitted at the war's start Europe has deliberately exempted energy supplies from Russia from sanctions. At the moment, Europe's supply cannot be secured in any other way. EU politicians continue to oppose outright gas sanctions, instead pushing voluntary diversification while quietly expanding LNG import capacity, adding 54 more infrastructure before 2030, even as gas demand is flat. So, we return to the question of moral high ground. On paper, the EU is the world's crusader for Ukrainian freedom, but in practice, it continues to indirectly bankroll Russia. These latest sanctions clamping down on Indian refining may score points in some diplomatic circles, but they change little on the ground. Russian oil keeps flowing west, routed through increasingly complex, lucrative, and sometimes even untraceable trade pathways. This tangled web of outrage and opportunism ultimately weakens the India-EU partnership that Brussels is so keen to maximize. The more the West preaches while secretly indulging, the faster the moral fabric frays. As long as Brussels depends on Russian energy, it is in no position to lecture Delhi, Beijing, or anyone else. To expect India to pay the price Europe won't is not just illogical, it is imperial in its arrogance. Swipe left for next video. The EU faces a hard choice: either bite the bullet and wean itself off Russian energy for real, at real economic cost, or stop telling others how to manage their own energy security. The current double game is not just bad policy, it's a diplomatic self-goal. Until then, the next time you hear a European official wag a moral finger at the developing world on Russian energy, remember where their own gas comes from and ask who the real hypocrite is. Latest blogs.